Thank you for stopping by at the Movie Marquee. Our podcast reviews well-known movies and contains spoilers. The podcast may contain mature subject matter and mature language. Listener discretion is advised. Enjoy the show.
Quiet on set. Places, everybody. And action.
Welcome to the Movie Marquee. Today on the Marquee, we're going to focus on our last movie episode for Richard Donner, the movie Assassins. With me are my co-host, Eric.
Honey, I'm going to tear your heart out.
And Ted.
I'm sorry, but I think I picked the wrong guy to be my hero.
And I'm Ken. And Ted, step outside and I will set you free.
See, you're not my hero anymore.
I'm not going to rip your heart out.
Since you're not going to rip my heart out and I'm not your hero anymore, why don't we start with Eric with the particulars.
All right, today we're going to talk about the movie Assassins, starring Sylvester Stallone as Robert Rath, Antonio Banderas as Miguel Bain, Julianne Moore as Elektra, and a lot of other people you really don't care about. This movie came out October 6, 1995, with a budget of $50 million. Sidebar that Sylvester Stallone got $15 million of that. The movie was a bomb domestically, grossing about $31 million, internationally about $53 million. So it made about $85 million. Ultimately, it made a little bit of money.
What were the critics' responses to this movie?
Oh boy. Well, the critics were not too kind to this movie. Rotten Tomatoes gave this thing a certified rotten at 16%. The audience score was 45%. Not real good.
That's got to be by far our lowest movie so far.
Clearly was our lowest. I think Rotten Tomatoes is probably being very generous at 16. And ironically enough, Ken, we watched this movie on Saturday. It was at 18, remember?
So you went out there and lowered the bar?
No, I didn't, man. I've never seen one drop in like a 2-day period. They must have added another lousy review. It dropped from 18 to 16%.
Eric went out and manipulated the tomato meter.
You went on social media and be like, this is not even that good. And they're like, you know what, Eric? You're right. And so they put some more reviews in there.
Let's talk about some of these review here. This is where it gets really, really fun. Really hard to find anything positive about it. Our good friend Roger Ebert gave it 1.5 stars, and he had nothing good to say about it. I'm not even going to go into his review because it was just pretty much saying there is nothing in this movie that I like. It was a train wreck, and that's being very generous. Empire Magazine said the action is stilted and infrequent, reduced to indifferent gunplay, car chases, and one standout explosion when a gas main ignites. Entertainment Weekly says there's so much dead air floating around in this icy cool thriller that the director Richard Donner seems to be trying for an art house version of his Lethal Weapon series. Variety Magazine says a not much fun high-tech actioner. The New York Times says, although he lets Assassins run on too long, Mr. Donner gives it a dependably slick, big-budget style. That's probably the best review that I found. The Washington Post said it's noisy, shallow, and glibly violent. I'm going to go into some of my favorite reviews. The San Francisco Chronicle says, Assassin misses the mark by a mile. My favorite one of all, though, is the San Francisco Examiner. It says, Assassins filled with lots of holes. And then I add, of course, assholes.
Wow.
And those are the reviews. None of them are positive.
Nice.
Back to you, Ken.
Well, Ted, you have the plot, if there is actually one.
Yes, the plot for Assassins. Assassins is a story about Robert Rath, who is a paid assassin who wants to retire. He's haunted by the memory of murdering his own mentor, Nikolai, years ago. He's on an assignment when someone gets to the quote-unquote mark before he does. That intruder turns out to be Miguel Bain, a fellow assassin and competitive sociopath. Bain plans to kill Rath to become the #1 assassin. As Rath tries to figure out who sent Bain, the contractor offers him a lucrative job that could allow him to retire. Kill a computer hacker named Elektra and the 4 Dutch buyers of a computer disk and retrieve the disk. Elektra has set up CCTV cameras and an elaborate mechanism for remotely moving items between rooms in the building where she is based. Bane gets there first and kills the 4 Dutch buyers who turn out to be Interpol agents. Wrath, meanwhile, spares Elektra and the two escape from Bane with the disc. Wrath exchanges the disc for his fee, given to him in a briefcase, which actually contains a bomb placed by his own contractor in an attempt to kill him. Elektra then tells him she swapped the disc, not sure if Wrath was coming back. Wrath demands a greatly increased fee from his contractor, this time to be wired to a bank. The contractor, who is also Bane's contractor, sends Bane a new mark, Wrath. Wrath and Elektra travel to the bank, where Wrath identifies the decrepit abandoned hotel that Bane will use as a sniper post and plans a trap. After Bane's apparent death, Nikolai appears, revealing that he had a bulletproof vest on when Wrath shot him years ago. Knowing that Nikolai would kill him too, Bane revives and joins Wrath in shooting him dead. Bane still plans to kill Wrath and become number 1. Elektra, however, puts on her sunglasses, allowing Wrath to see Bane. Wrath shoots through his own jacket and kills him. And that's the plot of Assassins.
I like your reading better than the actual movie, Ted. Well
thank
done.
you.
Well done.
We'll start with you, Ted. When was the first time you saw Assassins?
It was on video in the 90s. It would have been shortly after this movie came out. I didn't see it in the movie theater. I enjoy Antonio Banderas quite a bit. He would have been the reason that I would have gravitated towards the movie, because he was definitely hot, especially coming off of Desperado, which was a far superior movie. But I thought he was really cool. It would have been him over Sylvester Stallone that would have caused me to see the movie.
Sounds good. And how about you, Eric?
Saturday with you. We were eating pizza. It was very romantic.
Sounds like it.
Just kidding. I didn't even know this movie existed, honestly. Somehow I must have lost it in the 90s among the other crap Stallone movies that came out during this era. I didn't even know this thing existed until you said you were going to do it in this Richard Donner retrospective. So this is the first time I've ever seen it, and it'll probably be the last time. There's a spoiler alert for my review. Not good.
So the first time I saw it was probably on paid cable. I actually like Sylvester Stallone films, so this one was probably one that I would gravitate to, coming off Rockies, of course. And then Sylvester Stallone was just all over the place in the 90s as far as movies go. I was a big fan of a number of his movies. I know some of these action movies are blended together, but I kind of like Cliffhanger and Demolition Man.
So you're the one that likes Cliffhanger.
Yeah. Someone had to.
Somebody had
to.
Well, it has sure. John Lithgow in it as a bad guy, so...
Doesn't make it right.
It's still horrible.
And I will love the time when we do get to review Demolition Man. That's kind of like one of my guilty pleasures of Sylvester Stallone movies.
Why would we ever review Demolition Man?
Why would we ever review this movie?
I've been asking myself that. Under what circumstance? I'm serious. Under what circumstance would we review Demolition Man? Would that be in a Sylvester Stallone retrospective?
Maybe.
Why would you do that?
I mean, there's also Sandra Bullock.
You're going to throw Demolition Man in under a Sandra Bullock retrospective?
Hey, she decided to make that movie, didn't she? Also have Wesley Snipes in that. And Dennis Leary.
Oh, you're going to do a Wesley Snipes retro? Oh.
There's some good movies there with Wesley Snipes. White Men Can't Jump.
Major League and White Men Can't Jump. That's about it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Passenger 57 is rather forgettable.
I do actually like with Alan Alda, The White House. Like
Wesley Snipes starred in a movie with Alan Alda?
Yeah. Wow. Murder at 1600.
All I know is that's an extremely odd pairing of Wesley Snipes and Alan Alda.
I think it's an interesting movie.
Sounds like it.
What about all the Blade movies? Not a Blade fan?
Not a Blade fan.
They're okay. Hopefully the remake is going to be better.
He was also in that new Eddie Murphy movie that came out last year on Netflix. Dolomite. He's having a little bit of a resurgence. But anyway, this is not a Wesley Snipes movie.
Because he has to pay his tax bill off.
It was a little federal money.
He just owed them a little bit. I haven't really revisited it in a very long time until just recently. Why don't we go ahead and start off with things we did like about the movie? And since we already know where Eric kind of stands, why don't I start off with Ted?
There are parts of the movie that I do like. I actually do like the characters here. I don't think that they're very well used, but I think that the characters of Miguel Bain and Robert Rath and Elektra are very interesting. I hate to use the word hijinks because there are actual stakes that they're going after, so it's not really hijinks. Hijinks you would consider more of a comedy movie. Some of the situations they wind up in are extremely ridiculous. But the characters, I think they are interesting. I think the whole idea of an assassin who's trying to get out but has been double crossed, definitely an interesting point for a good movie. And of course, then you always have to have the guy who's going to try to replace him. I think that's a really good starting point for a movie. I just think the situations that they find themselves in they're not the best. So I think the writing really let these characters down, but really do like the characters here.
How about you, Eric? Was there anything in this movie that you found remotely interesting?
The only thing about this movie that I found remotely interesting was the communication signal that Rath had with his handler, if you will, his little email communication. Wherever he was, anywhere, he had perfect communication to send his little signal.
Well, I have questions about that.
Especially in 1995. But besides that...
Wouldn't it have to have been hardwired? They'd have had to have been hardlined to get that sort of stuff, right?
Oh, yeah.
I didn't quite understand because it's like, I remember that time and you had to have a phone jack connection.
It might have been really expensive to have Wi-Fi or something like that.
No, Wi-Fi did not exist, but it's very interesting how they did it. Ted, you brought up an interesting point about the plot of the movie, comparing it to The Assassin and, his last job and stuff. This reminds me of the George Clooney movie, The American.
Oh, yeah.
Which I think is an incredibly much done better movie.
Oh, yeah.
Obviously than this. But I know there's probably 2 or 3 other movies that I can't think of off the top of my head that this a plot, if you will, has been played out many, many times.
The story has been told, but I think the characters are such that they're unique enough that with better hands, this could have been something. This is a movie that was written and then somebody was brought in for a rewrite. And the 2 people who originally wrote the movie were the Wachowski brothers. Now they're infamous for the Matrix movies. And you can kind of see where the outlines that they had set up about how things are kind of more convoluted than they needed to be. There's too many moving parts to all the situations that they're brought into.
Too many unbelievable moving parts.
Right. Like 'em or hate 'em, that's definitely a Wachowski brothers thing.
It's also the era, too. And I know I'm a broken record when I'm doing these movie reviews. I always speak about the era. But in the mid-90s, pretty much all the Stallone movies were kind of on par with this. It's ironic. I've seen all the bad Stallone movies of the 90s. We could go down the list. There are many of them. This one, for whatever reason, snuck by me. Didn't even know it existed. But it's right on par. It's actually below par. It's right up there with the high budget, marginal acting, big explosions, just everything that is of the 90s, where you want the big action, big explosions, the big stars. Stallone was huge in this time, and it just kind of flows in that direction. That's kind of how I see it.
I completely agree. The writer that they brought in to change what the Wachowskis wrote is Brian Hageland. I think he's part of the problem here because his next movie is also a Richard Donner movie. It's a movie that I don't like at all, and that's Conspiracy Theory with Julia Roberts and Mel Gibson. It is also as convoluted as a lot of the situations that happen in Assassins.
Is it because Mel Gibson's in it?
Actually, Mel Gibson and Julia Roberts, they do the best that they can do with the material they're given in that movie. And it's very similar to Assassins in that Sylvester Stallone and Julianne Moore and Antonio Banderas, they do the best that they can. And 2 out of those 3, Banderas and Moore, are quality actors, like of the highest order. I think this is really a writer's problem. I think you have the basis of a good story. You have a couple of really interesting characters that you can connect to and can kind of relate to. But you lose that connection when they start to get into all of these completely unbelievable situations. They're too fanciful for even the average viewer to go and stretch their mind to.
That's true. I mean, you have to obviously suspend some of your belief when you're watching a movie of this caliber. But this thing kind kind of goes way over the mark.
Oh, yeah, it goes off
Yeah.
the rails. We're going to get into some of the stuff that we don't like, but
Sounds like we already
what
started.
is it with 90s action movies and the use of a monorail?
That's a good point.
We had this similar situation in The Firm. What is it with a monorail, and why does it go so slow that people can drive or run next to it? Was the monorail this revolutionary thing in the 90s that had to be included in every single action movie?
We all wanted to be in the Jetsons, so it's probably just going that direction.
Epcot Center had a monorail. That opened up in the 80s.
Yeah, and they thought we'd all be living in monorails in the 2000s.
I guess. I don't know.
We were talking about the Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi didn't come around until the mid-90s. And then granted, this movie is mid-90s, but it wouldn't have been available to Wrath or anybody else really at this particular point, especially in Seattle.
Especially in a car.
In a car. Yeah. That was a big problem with it. My favorite part was probably them in the taxi. I really liked the interaction there.
That's a part I hate.
I liked it. There were some stupid things about it. I liked it when he tried to shoot through the glass.
And the bullet didn't explode and kill Banderas in the face.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
But, the chit-chat, like the little...
Yeah, I see. I don't care for that. If you're going by scenes, the best sequence of the movie, and even though that it ends up convoluted and weird, is when they're in Puerto Rico and Bane is waiting for Sylvester Stallone to come out of the bank.
I thought they were in Mexico. They're in Puerto Rico?
Yeah, they're in Puerto Rico.
Not like it makes a difference, but...
The Puerto Rican flag's all over. It's hard to make that distinction because they are celebrating...
Muerto, Day of the Dead.
The Day of the Dead.
That's why I thought they were in Mexico.
Muertos.
Yeah.
Right. Do they celebrate the Day of the Dead in Puerto Rico as well?
I think there's a version in every Hispanic and Spanish colony.
How about us? I mean, we should have a Day of the Dead and go into cemeteries and have a party.
There are parts of the country of the United States that do celebrate. Yeah.
When is Day of the Dead, roughly? Do you know?
It's November 1st.
That's what I thought. It was right after Halloween.
It coincides with the Catholic holiday, All Saints Day.
So you were mentioning the scene towards the end where he's like waiting Wrath out. I liked it when he goes into the bank and they have that discussion.
I think that's very well paced because it actually builds the tension. The rest of the movie never builds tension. That whole sequence is really good until they find out that Nikolai is the contractor, which I saw coming 10 miles away.
Oh, yeah.
Because he keeps flashing back to that the whole movie. It didn't need to be. The two of them were good enough just to have that scene be their own. It didn't need that cartoon, that Looney Tunes ending at the end.
So what this movie needed in that situation would have been a fourth main character, who would have been somebody that maybe Wrath trusted throughout this whole time and that he kept on going to, and then found out at the end that he was the bad guy, but bringing somebody back from the dead.
Like Elektra?
That would have been at least an interesting twist.
All of a sudden, we have a better movie.
Especially when she says there's no way to talk to a lady. That would have been probably the best way to put that together. All of a sudden, the lady is Elektra. So that would have been kind of cool. But I will say one more good thing about this movie before we transition to ripping on it, which we've already kind of transitioned to. I do like Antonio Banderas in this movie. He is fun. He's a little over the top. And every scene that he's in, it actually elevates the scene that they're in. Whether it be at the hotel when he kills everybody and he's like, this is my beeper. Or he's just having conversations with Wrath back and forth. I just enjoy him. He's got a lot of energy in him, and he allows this movie to be enjoyable to me to a certain extent because of how he plays it.
I couldn't agree more. He and Julianne Moore, and even Sylvester Stallone, they're the highlights of this movie. Banderas, his character is supposed to be over the top. The writing fails him in almost every single way, but he does bring that energy that is really good, and he is designed for this. You can tell he's having fun, especially coming off of I Mariachi, then Desperado with Robert Rodriguez. And Desperado was intensely successful as far as an underground movie. And he got to play a different character because in the Desperado movies, he gets to play the hero. And here he gets to play the villain. And he does it very well.
To the point where the end almost semi-ruins it with, like you said, when Nikolai comes back and takes away from that ending. It's stupid. The three leads do what they have to do. I mean, Sylvester Stallone is every character that he's done in the 90s for action movies. He's basically the same person in every single movie. Sylvester Stallone, if he does one thing well, is boxing and action movies.
Ultimately, he's likable.
I'll actually say that I think he's a decent actor. Copland is a good example of when I think he does a really good job of being an actor.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm not feeling good.
Oh no,
Oh.
You
Copland is a
brought
good movie.
Copland in?
Copland is a
Oh.
good movie, and he does a good job.
Oh.
He does a good job of playing Rocky again with the Creed
Yes.
reboot.
I think you're both high as a kite. Yeah, I think you guys are not watching the same movie or something's not there, but I think you're both high as a kite. Man, all right, Stallone is Stallone. That is a given. 90s Stallone in an action movie, this is what you get. I agree. That's probably the only positive thing I agree with you about everything you've said. I don't think he's good in it. You know, I'm watching this movie, and Banderas is reminding me of a really poor man's version of the Joker, like a Joaquin Phoenix Joker style actor. I don't know why I was getting that. Maybe it was the crazy hair he had, but he was annoying. I didn't think he was good in this. I did not even like the character. And Julianne Moore, oh man, I was hoping she was going to get the bullet in the head. She drove me nuts, just whiny and just, and that cat, man.
I know when we were watching it together, when Antonio Banderas, he laughed. He thought that Raph killed, he calls her Jasmine. But when he thinks that he killed her, he goes, hoo, 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 ha, 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 and just kind of
He does
leaves.
do that.
And I think Eric was like, he reminds me of just a poor Joker right there.
I don't know. I think it's because I guess I do like Antonio Banderas.
I like Antonio Banderas as well. I think he's a really good actor, but I think this is just so over the top for me. It wasn't enjoyable to watch. It just didn't play right into the character or into the movie. You know, in those movies where you have an actor it's over the top on purpose, there's a reason for it, and it usually plays well. In this one, no.
Well, this
Weak.
is like really early in Julianne Moore's career. I think
This would have been prior to Boogie Nights.
This would have been prior to Boogie Nights. I think around this time, I think I saw her in a movie called 9 Months with Hugh Grant.
Oh,
And
yeah.
A rom-com.
That's a train wreck of a movie.
Yeah, it's a rom-com. It's what you get. I understand.
Yeah.
But she's just not likable in this. She really isn't.
I don't dislike her. The problem is we don't get a lot of, as Ted has said earlier, we don't have a lot of background on these characters. And for a 2.5-hour movie, there needs to be some type of background for each character. And she's supposed to be this security expert. And we're not introduced to her until I think probably 20 to 25 minutes into the film. I mean,
And I'm sorry, guys. I can't get over the floppy disk. I'm sorry. It's so badly outdated. I can't get past it.
Yeah, it's tough.
You know, it is really tough.
When I was talking to Ken about this, that was something that I was having an issue with as well. Unfortunately, I think that when we look back at these sort of films from the 90s, then into the early 2000s, it's going to be a problem because another really bad action movie that I actually kind of like as a guilty pleasure is Swordfish. And it doesn't hold up as far as the
That's true.
but I mean,
as far as the technology goes. But the
we
bottom
still have
line,
the same technology now, though. I mean, now it's just
no, it's 10 times.
Okay,
It's
but
infinitely more.
you have to look at it this way. You can say the technology is outdated, but of course it's going to be outdated a year after the movie's made. But you have to take it with a grain of salt with the acting. Let's talk about like the 60s and 70s microfiche, right? Everything was microfiche with like the Bond villains and everything. So obviously microfiche is a thing of the past and no one practically under 25 knows what that stuff even is. But if the movie's good, if the acting is good, if the plot is good, you get thrown into it and you're like, oh yeah, it's so cool, awesome. But this, it doesn't hold up.
But isn't a flash drive the same thing basically as a floppy disk?
No, are you kidding?
No,
why isn't it the same thing? You still have to... You still pull it out and you still have to plug it in for the information to come up.
Floppy disk holds like no data whatsoever. It's so minutely small.
Here's the thing, though. Ultimately, all that is, it's the perfect use of a MacGuffin. It is a plot point. It serves one purpose and one purpose only, to advance the plot. If you were remaking the movie, it could be interchangeable. It's nothing more than that. So when I've watched it again, after I had told Ken I had that complaint, I ignored it because it does nothing to advance the story other than that's the thing that they have to go after.
Right. No, and it is of the eras, 1995. That's the technology you had.
Although I still don't understand how they knew by just putting that hard disk into a disk drive and having it come up green. I don't understand. Does that mean that it knows that there's something
data,
on it?
The correct data?
I didn't quite understand that.
Yeah, that threw
myself.
me for a loop a little bit,
But-
unless it's something that's like pre-programmed to find something that is on the disc that they know that's on the disc, and
Okay. It's just a vehicle to move the plot across, because ultimately at the end of the movie, it doesn't even matter. It matters so little. It's on the floor, and Julianne Moore's character has to go back and pick it up because they forgot about it.
Here's the other problem with it too. If when he first tries to exchange the disc for the money and they give him the bomb instead, he throws in, she's laughing because she's like, well, I didn't give you the right disc. I figured, but it's like, wait a second here. Why didn't you? I mean, she wasn't sure, and then you picked him up and got the money, and
that's the movie trying to be too cute. It's
Right.
trying to be too cute at that point. It's trying to be a Mission Impossible. It's trying to be a movie that it's not at that point. But I will say the whole idea with the bomb in that briefcase, how he discovers that is one
With
of
the
the
radio.
more one of the more intelligent parts of the movie, that he holds it up and it interferes with the radio in the car. I thought that was a pretty interesting way for them to actually discover that it's a problem.
But the interesting part of that is when he discovers that, he doesn't immediately throw it out the window. He's like, pull it on this road, pull there, pull there, pull there.
Right.
How does he know when it's going to blow?
Exactly.
You know?
Where does he know that there's going to be a garbage to throw in? It's not like he's from the area. Whenever there's some type of drug deal or something going down, I make sure my radio's on and that I'm playing music when picking up my partner up. Any other particular time, but when you're picking up Raph for money.
It's a plot. It's a plot contrivance.
Yes. And there's a lot of those. That's the thing, is there's so many of those conveniences that push everything along. This is one of those movies that if you go see it in the theater, you have some popcorn, you have a date, or you have your wife or whatever, you're just hanging out with the guys and watching the movie. It's fine. It's an enjoyable movie. It's when you watch it, I think, a second time and you say to yourself, even the first time, you probably will recognize some of the stupid things that they put in here. But the more and more you watch it, the more and more you get frustrated with it, because you're like, how did they do that?
Ken, I've only seen it one time and I'm frustrated.
Yeah, this isn't a movie that you want to watch more than once in a small period of time, because a lot of things pop up. We could have a whole section called plot holes, or things in the plot that happen that never get mentioned again. How about the fact that those are cops from Interpol? Why it's Interpol, that's wholly ridiculous. But the fact that Miguel just kills 6 or 8 Interpol agents, and the cops are never looking for them.
Never happened, right?
Don't look for them at all. And if it's Interpol, they should have been stopped at the airport when they're flying to Puerto Rico. All 3 of them.
I don't know if they have a good description of Raph. I don't know about that. My biggest problem is the cemetery scene. How does Raph get invited to be there in the first place?
And then he's got invited to a funeral. It's not
I don't know. There's a lot of security detail there. There's cops there. I mean, I think it would have to be a special.
Those are personal security.
But there's also cops there.
Yeah, they come after people call them. After all of a sudden people start dying.
So you have personal security, but they don't check anybody.
Oh, right. Well,
no,
it's
a guy with
ridiculous.
His hand in a sling. You're not going to check that. And then when the shooting starts, the police are coming. Don't they see that there's more than one shooter going back and forth between Sylvester Stallone and Antonio Banderas, just shooting at each other? Nobody seems to know that Sylvester Stallone has a gun as well. And then on top of that, once they do arrest Antonio Banderas' character, they let everybody go. They don't question anybody else about what happened.
Well, yeah, and then Antonio Banderas, he kills 4 cops.
Right.
And here again, the cops are never looking for them. The cops never pop up again in the entire rest of the movie.
They call it in. They say what happened. Officers are down. Raph is able to show up at the scene of the crime, look around to see his handcuffs and stuff like that. Still no cops. They're transporting a murderer from one place to another. You don't think there's other cops nearby that could have showed up once the cops were shot? The cops should have been there like instantaneously. When we see that throughout the whole film, I mean, then you have the taxi and how he's able to get away from all the police chase, which is
right.
There's a lot of ridiculousness. You have Antonio Banderas, he shoots the window, so he's trying to shoot Raph through the other window, and then he's pinned up against the bus and
scenes that could be cut out. Here again, we're talking about a 2-hour movie that shouldn't be 2 hours. It should be about an hour and a half. That whole sequence is stuff that could be cut out.
And I was sitting with Eric, and Eric's like, how does he know to pick up the right guy in the taxi?
Yeah,
I mean,
what's up with that? What are the odds of him finding the right guy at a hotel pickup? Come on.
It's also glossed over the fact that Julianne Moore's character, Electra, she's basically a peeping Tom.
oh, yeah.
And that's never brought up again. Never brought up that she's basically running surveillance on her entire building and an invasion of privacy.
Let me read a little bit here since we're talking about this. This is something I did not read. This is from Roger Ebert's review. Okay.
Oh, boy.
So he has a little section called Other Problems. Other problems in the movie. 1. How when a guy is hanging outside the window of a cab and you crash it against the side of a bus, can he avoid being hurt? 2. If you hold a table up in front of you, will it really save you after a gas explosion blows you out of a third-floor window? 3. If you're holding a briefcase containing a bomb, would you throw it out of the car window or hold it until you could drive down an alley and place it in a convenient dumpster? 4. If you know a sniper was waiting for you to emerge from the front door of a bank, would it occur to you to leave through the back, sneak up on the guy and kill him rather than depending on the ditzy computer nerd who says she's unable to shoot anyone? 5. Would you question the political and history credentials of a man who tells you he had to fake his death in 1980 because the Cold War was ending? Examine. I mean, that's right off Ebert, man. Right off Ebert.
Yeah.
Crazy.
He walks out of the bank. We got the money. And he's like thinking that this is all over. And it's like, wait a second. You never got confirmation that you got the gun. And then you stare up waiting for him to shoot you.
And there's only one entrance out of a bank, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Hey, Mr. Bank President, I'm holding $20 million in cash. Anyway, maybe I can go through a different
door
exit.
Right.
Yeah, maybe a service entrance.
I'll even take a window for all the money that I have.
There's a guy with a rifle in front and just waiting for me. Can I just go out like the east side window, maybe?
Those are all really good points.
Why does it take 8 hours, by the way, to count all that money? That's a long time to have to count all that money. That
90s technology.
This
a
is
1, a 2, a 3.
I lost count. Let me start again. A 1, a 2.
This is another action movie trope that a large amount of money, you need 2 or 3 duffel bags to carry all of the money.
Not a nice suitcase, right?
It wasn't until I got a job at a bank and I actually saw $100,000 in hundreds. It's not very big.
Well, you think of the movie Dodgeball, where he offers him the bribe to throw the dodgeball game. He brings the briefcase and it's like just one stack of $100 bills.
Yeah, this is a notorious trope. Unless he's getting it in 20s, it shouldn't have been that hard for the bank to pull this off. I do have a question, though. How come nobody's knocked off that bank?
Yeah, a bank of Puerto Rico with $20 million in cash?
If they're holding $16 million in cash, no, because it's 16, because they took $4 million for their fee.
I see.
They have $16 million in their vault.
At least.
That is absolutely ludicrous.
Didn't even phase them. Like, 16 million? No problem.
Unless this is a thing in the Caribbean because they'd have the offshore accounts like that.
They have one
like
bank.
in the Bahamas. Maybe that's a common thing.
Puerto Rico's a U.S. territory. Wouldn't fall under that.
My Lord.
Me and Eric were joking about it last night, or the other night when we watched the film. We were joking about how this for the cartel or this is a mobster
cartel,
bank.
First National Cartel.
Yeah.
Because I thought it was in Mexico.
If they're keeping that kind of money around, let's take the bank manager or whoever that old guy was, the bank president, let's take him hostage and let's get all the money out of the vault if they're holding that much money in the vault. Holy
And I like how they have one security guard at the door, a little metal detector, and one security guard, right?
Hey, I like the metal detector. It was really nice looking. We barely even noticed it was a metal detector. It was one of those big long ones that looked like from 2001. It looked like 2 monoliths.
All of those things, we're talking about tropes that are overused in action movies. That this movie and this writer, he does absolutely nothing to make it unique or interesting than in any other action movie. If you're following this outline, you have to bring something unique or something that's tried and true more palatable to the viewer, and they don't. You know the moment that she has a stupid cat, that the cat's not going to do what she wants because cats are that way. And you know the cat's going to run underneath the bed. You know the cat's going to be a problem.
I did like the fact that the cat liked Sylvester Stallone's character.
That one gag is the only reason that the cat should have been there. The cat should have never. She should have never brought the cat to pick up the money from those Dutch buyers. That whole part of the movie could be entirely cut from the movie, and you never miss a beat.
Interesting thing about the Dutch buyers,
They're
I was confused.
Interpol.
I was confused by this because me and Eric are watching, and I'm like, "Oh, the Germans," and he's like, "No, they're Dutch," but they were speaking German.
The Netherlands, they do speak some German. Those two countries being as close as they are, they do speak similar languages.
And
But
they always have ponytails.
Here's the thing, they're Dutch, but she calls him Hans
Hans Gruber?
Gruber, from the guy from Die Hard. So she even gets it incorrect in that because Hans Gruber was German. That whole section of the movie could be cut. Nothing happens there that is integral to the plot of the movie. This happens over and over again. The fact that she has that stupid truck. See, this is all part that doesn't need to be there, and it makes it ridiculous.
I don't think it's that ridiculous, to be honest with you, because you did need to show how important this disc was. You had to show that there was somebody else interested in the disc outside of...
You don't have to spend any more time on the disc. The disc is a MacGuffin. All you have to do is mention that the disc is valuable, explain that there's information on the disc that's going to bring everybody down.
What's the point of her character at all then? Didn't you just kill her off and be done with it?
Nope, because she's the mark, and she has the MacGuffin.
Yeah, but how did she get the MacGuffin?
They still don't explain how she got it.
What's the point of her even having it if she doesn't have a buyer to give it to? That she's just sitting on it?
All we know that she does have it. We know that she's a computer person, and we know that she got something that got her in trouble. That's all we need to know, and that's what we know.
Cool
we don't need a
things.
whole sequence where they kill 8 Interpol agents that never pays off at the end. I mean, he commits 2 murders in the apartment building, and they blow the apartment building up, and the cops never, ever get there.
Eric was bringing up Ebert's thing about a table protecting you from a explosion. The thing is, he falls out that window. What happens to the table? You don't see the table anywhere. It doesn't seem to...
The table magically disappears.
Yeah, the table magically disappears. Like I said, there are some problems.
He wouldn't have gotten up. He wouldn't have got up and run away.
Yeah, that's the other thing. Is that he fell? Is it 2-story?
I think it's 2 stories.
No, it's got to be 3 because he goes to the second floor where...
Oh, that's right, because that's where that couple
lives that she's been watching like a soap opera.
Now, this is another 90s thing. They essentially kind of took that plot contrivance. I don't know if you ever saw the movie Sliver.
Yes.
With
Sharon Stone.
And
one of the Baldwin
William
brothers.
Baldwin? One of the Baldwins and Tom Berenger. That's another
horrible movie.
Well, it's a horrible movie.
Yeah.
But they stole that from that movie.
I kind of disagree with you about the hotel and everything. There were some kind of cool things as far as them both going after Elektra. Stallone doesn't kill her. I find that when Antonio Banderas looks up to see who the room was charged to and then finds out what room she's in based on the charges, there are some smart things there. And I do appreciate some of the smart things.
I hate the fact that he goes to the computer and finds, that's how he finds.
I don't like the Sylvester Stallone one because that's too easy, but I like the Antonio Banderas one because that's more practical. But also I think these two assassins, for being number 1 and number 2, seem to be very sloppy. I watch Rath's character. He's always standing and sitting in front of a window. I think of Grosse Point Blank, how the assassin in that movie, played by John Cusack, is always mindful of not sitting with a window behind him.
Well, they're not very good because they leave a path of destruction in their wake. The whole point is to get in and out without anybody detecting you. They leave a path of destruction.
It's amazing how they can shoot well when they have to shoot well, but in the earlier of the movie, when they're in the cemetery, they can't shoot worth crap. They can't seem to shoot at all.
No, not at all.
Sylvester Stallone is missing him by miles and miles. And then at the end, he's able to shoot at him behind his back by just looking at the sunglasses of Elektra, but he can't shoot him point blank.
It looked like he had the gun going through his abdomen. That's how I thought when I watched it. I'm like,
kind of did. It's not shot well. And that's Donner's fault. Some of this has to fall on him as well.
Hey, man, he's a director. It does fall on him.
I mean, ultimately, he's got creative control here.
I think it goes back with what Eric was saying about the Lethal Weapon movies. When you have somebody like Mel Gibson in the cast of Lethal Weapon, I think you get away with murder on those type of films. We've already looked at some movies that he's done really well. I mean, he did the Superman movie, the Omen movie. He does Lethal Weapon movies extremely well. Does he sometimes...
phone it in?
Yeah.
Hey, they can't all be gems, right?
Because he was cranking them out in the 90s. Maybe he just did this movie way too often, because you have conspiracy theory as well, which I particularly like. And I was wondering if this should have been the movie we should have done instead of Assassins.
Because it's just as bad.
Oh, no. Conspiracy theory is a hell of a lot better. Not much better, but much better.
I think the reason why that movie might be better is because of Mel Gibson's character having the memory issues, and his character is more interesting than any of the characters that we have here. The characters, I have to admit that the characters are uninteresting because we don't have much of a background except for Sylvester Stallone's character. Is we know that he killed his best friend, his mentor. Idol. That's all we know about him. We know that Elektra is security expert, and Antonio Banderas is basically just wanting to be number one. That's all he cares about, is being the number one hitman in all the world. Because when hitmen go out and become hitman, that's what they look at. Is they look at the ranking. I'm sure if they go online, there's probably a top 20 hitman ranking list. So
they're Hitman Monthly magazine.
Yeah,
sure,
exactly. How do you both know that you're number one? And if you're the biggest fan of Raph's in the world, how do you not know that Raph is there? And he's like right next to you in the other car when you're in the police car, and you're acting like you don't know who he is. For the biggest fan, to me, that just seems kind of stupid. And the guy was shooting at you. You never got one glimpse of who was shooting at you, and you're an assassin. I did like the beginning where he's got the other assassin and they're walking in the...
Yeah, that's pretty... I
thought that set up everything kind of well, and then giving him the gun there to shoot himself so he's not a mark. I thought that was a nice way to start off the movie. There are some nice starting points at the beginning of the movie that just, like you said, Ted, doesn't pay off later on. There's some plot holes here where they introduce some things. It doesn't pay off later because you don't do anything with it. I still enjoy this movie, but it's easy to pick apart because of how it was made. And I wonder how long production was on this movie, because in my opinion, it probably was really quick.
It seems very paint by numbers that way. I would like to know how much they changed of the Wachowskis' script, because they changed enough that the Wachowskis actually wanted their name removed from the movie as far as a writing credit, but the Writers Guild said no and demanded that they keep their name on it.
Could it be because we have Sylvester Stallone as the main character? And I already said that I think he's a decent actor, but if you're doing a complex thriller, do you really want Sylvester Stallone to be your lead smart guy?
Hell no.
And I'm wondering if that has a lot to do with it, because you have to make Sylvester Stallone very believable as the smartest guy in the room. Yeah. I mean, we see him with the glasses on, and I was talking to Eric while we were watching. I'm like, they have the glasses on to make him look smart.
I'm sure.
And his character should be smart. I mean, he's an assassin. In the whole movie, does he not do anything smart?
We know he's smart. You know how we know he's smart?
Because they tell us he's smart.
Nope, because he plays chess.
Yes.
The 1980 game of chess, which somehow is saved on a computer 15 years later because it was so important to him. Where did this game come from? Is it like a special website that saves data from 15 years ago? I mean, does he transfer it over to his computer every few years and say, I'm going to keep this game on my computer because it means so much to me? Where the heck did this game come from 15 years ago?
You just gave that whole plot point more thought than the person who wrote it. Yeah. That's how you're supposed to know that he's smart and that he's calculating. But here again, everything that happens in the movie proves that he's not. They leave a path of destruction in their wake, and there are no cops. At least in a Jerry Bruckheimer movie, like The Rock, there are cops that hold the people accountable. There's nobody here. They just go and they shoot people willy-nilly just all over the place. That hotel has 8 dead bodies in it. Antonio Banderas' character, he shoots 2 people in the hallway.
Just for the hell of it.
But then he drags them into that other room, and there's no blood trail. He shoots them, I think, 8 times. And that's another thing. As far as shooting goes, they never reload. You know this, Eric.
Oh, yeah.
How many bullets are in a standard clip? It's 6, right?
In a 9mm, it can be up to 10.
So I'll give him a little bit of latitude. He shoots that couple in the hallway. He shoots them at least 8 times. And there's no blood.
And you see
None.
her reaction when
Zero.
they're all getting shot. Her reaction it's really bad acting when that's all going down.
And that's where he discovers that they're Interpol. Here again, it never pays off. Nobody is looking for these people.
Yeah, they basically blow it off when they're in the hotel room when Wrath and Elektra and she's asking about the shooting. And he's like, nope, there's nothing on the news. That's how they wrap it up. Really?
And here's another point here that really kind of got on my nerves. Julianne Moore's character, she knows that there are at least 2 people out to kill her. The one, she kind of has feeling that he's not going to kill her, but she's not real sure. So you listen to the guy and he sends you off to go back to the pet store and you see your neighbor and then you turn the car around and go follow her back to the apartment where there is a guy you know that's trying to kill you. At that point, you just salute and say, good luck to you, neighbor. Because she's been watching these people illegally, by the way, in their own home, we're supposed to think that she's got some sort of affinity for this couple.
And I like how Banderas pulls the camera out from the smoke detector, right? He
Yes.
just knows it's there.
That was kind of cool because then he finds out that she's kind of a weirdo. I do kind of like that whole looking into the camera thing that he does there. It's over the top, but it's kind of cool that that's how he figures it out.
I think it's stupid. Just happens to notice that the smoke detector's up there and it happens to have a camera in there and it happens to lead upstairs and she's the reason for the camera. I mean...
Well, they still leave 2 dead bodies in this place, and they blow it up.
We don't have to worry about the 2 dead bodies anymore, so...
No, the explosion in the apartment does nothing to the lady's body.
Doesn't burn it up?
Nope.
I think it's also interesting that she doesn't even notice that her husband or boyfriend or whatever it is shot dead right there. And she walks by.
Considering he's the only one that bleeds in the entire movie.
Pretty much.
That's shot.
It's not much of a blood either. It's kind of like it looked like juice was spilled on her or something like that. I don't know. It's
weak.
And then when she gets in there and she notices that the smoke detector has been ripped, and she automatically thinks now she's being recorded by the neighbor upstairs. So she runs upstairs. How the heck does she know that? Is she into technology that she knows that's what's going on? It just seemed like there was a lot of issues there.
And does she have the whole place wired up?
Yes, because there's another floor that she's looking at. There was another apartment that she was looking at besides the one downstairs.
Here again, a plot point that doesn't need to be. Because that plot point, that should make us not like her.
And how did he find her anyway? I see he looks at the picture with the cat and he sees was it radio towers, did we say, Eric?
Right.
Yeah, they're giant radio towers.
How does he know where to find the giant radio towers? It's not like he has the internet.
Because he's Antonio Banderas.
And they're not from the Seattle area, from my understanding. Unless all hitmen hang out in Seattle.
Of course they do. Especially when they're filming this movie.
I guess so. There's so many things that we could just keep on going on and on with this podcast, but
there's whole chunks of this movie that don't need to be there. And then it ends up being 2 hours and it's like it's completely bloated, it's completely overdone, and it's all to get essentially 2 action sequences that don't need to be there. The whole thing of them in the car and then hitting the bus and everything, that doesn't need to be there. It moves the plot of the movie along in no way.
Well, I think it's interesting to have that initial go after each other. So I don't have a problem with the taxi cab, but I think you need to choose one or the other. I don't think you can have both because we don't want this movie to be 2.5 hours. We want this movie to be an hour and a half. If it was tighter, I think this movie could have been better, but it's not tight.
No. I think with a better writer, this movie could have been better.
You said there were probably better writers and they made some changes. Maybe the original screenplay was good and then they just messed around with it forever.
I'll say this. The Wachowskis, they hit gold with one movie. They hit a massive home run with The Matrix. Their other movies leave something to be desired. And then you can argue about the other 2 Matrix movies.
Oh, I would argue, yeah.
Whether or not those follow up The Matrix well.
It's just as bad as like The Hangover and then The Hangover 2 and 3.
It's not.
The Hangover is great.
But no, I'm talking about the sequels though.
The problem with the Matrix sequels, you have to have a philosophy person there with you that explains everything because they get way deep into philosophical things. And that's where the movie starts to lose its momentum.
It's mojo.
I don't know if necessarily their script for Assassins would have been the home run, or even a single at this point that would have saved this movie. I think also, too, it's because of the time. There's a lot of these kind of movies out there, and there are movies out there that do it better. As far as the cat and mouse type of game that Antonio Banderas and Sylvester Stallone play, you also have, in this time frame, you have Michael Mann's movie Heat. That's a cat and mouse movie as well.
Very well done.
But it's extremely well done.
Yeah.
It's extremely tight, and it's extremely well acted. This suffers for that reason. I mean, that's a reason that I would have seen this on video cassette or not seen it in the movie theater. Because I was going to the movies a lot when this movie came out, and I didn't see it.
Not even on the radar.
We're kind of tearing this movie apart, and probably rightfully so. I mean, like I said earlier, I don't know if this was a rush job. If there was a time frame where Richard Donner's given here and saying we need this movie done by a certain period of time, regardless, it's not directed well. I'm thinking of movies in the mid-90s like this, and I think there's just tons of them. And I was trying to think of a smart movie in the 90s that is kind of like this. And I can't really think anything off the top of my head in this mid-90s era. Maybe it's because Sylvester Stallone has had almost exclusive rights to this genre. You also had Arnold Schwarzenegger making crappy movies like this too in the 90s as well.
Okay, here's a case in point. The guy who did the score for this movie, Richard Donner wanted him to come back and do parts of the score over. And the reason that he didn't is because he was working on Die Hard with a Vengeance. Now, if you're talking about a mid-90s action movie that actually does something intelligent, yes. Die Hard with a Vengeance I will hold up as an example of something that's done very well, even though it's a sequel. It's a sequel that could stand on its own as its own movie.
I agree with you on that.
And I don't think it's extremely well done, but it's well done that it's super entertaining.
True.
There are movies out there, I think of probably maybe a hair or two later, but a movie like True Lies, that does this whole action movie thing extremely well and does it in a very intelligent manner. They are out there. There's just a avalanche of these type of movies in the 90s. They're looking to hit a home run. They released all of these around the 4th of July and around Memorial Day and then Labor Day. That's when you had this flood of movies come into those three areas because the companies wanted to hit those three holidays. They wanted the summer blockbuster, and so that they were just producing whatever. And this movie would definitely get lost because it's not done as well as other movies.
When me and Eric were watching it together the other day, when they were asking for the price change, because it was $40,000 she was going to get at the beginning, and then it was $2 million to Raph to get everything, and then they moved
to
it
$20
up
million.
To $20 million,
which in today's money is going to probably be about $35 to $40 million.
But they also said $25 million. I think that was what was on the computer. So there was these issues with not even getting the money right. And you were talking about how much money he got. I was looking it up, and they say that $1 million in $100 bills would weigh about 22 pounds. So just think that's what they say.
No.
$1 million.
Not in $100 bills.
I mean, if you think about it, $100 bills and $1 million, how many bills is that? That's a lot of bills. Even if it weighed half that, let's just say 11 pounds for 1 million, and you have 16 million. Granted, it's Sylvester Stallone, and he's got steroids up the kazoo, but still, that's going to be very hard to carry in just a briefcase.
I don't understand how they could even carry anything at all, because everybody in this movie is wet. Did either of you notice that? In every scene of this movie, they're hot, they're wet. There's not one scene in this movie where somebody's not wet. Nobody runs into any water. It took me right out of the movie. When they get out of the taxi in Puerto Rico and all you see is the sweat stains on Sylvester Stallone, it's like, dude, really? It looks like you just took a bath and put your clothes on. And of course, Antonio Banderas is always wet in this movie. He's never dry in the entire movie.
Yeah, he's always got a little sweat going. Going back to some interesting things that are just kind of weird, like when he breaks out of the cop car, he's able to break somebody's neck with one hand in the back seat.
Here again, that whole sequence doesn't even need to be there. It's ridiculous to begin with.
You could say that every sequence.
Because here again, he kills 4 cops.
Yes, and nobody's there to...
And it never pays off. At least the guys in Reservoir Dogs get caught.
Well, that's a smarter movie with better dialogue, so we shouldn't even
Wow,
compare that movie
exactly.
to
Better
each other.
actors across the board.
And
Writer, director, yeah.
One other scene I will point out is the cemetery scene. She has to get out, so she wants to check out everything that's going down because it is interesting. I understand why she did it. I do wonder what happened to the cat that she was holding when she escaped the raft to get down there.
all of a sudden, the cat disappeared.
All of a sudden, the cat disappears. In all these movies where you have a pet, it's very convenient for these pets to just disappear and reappear whenever you want them to.
Sure.
But I like it that he's hanging out down there. He's talking to the locals. I don't know if he asked the locals if they speak English because he wants to tell them what he's doing in English so they don't understand, because he does speak Spanish throughout the movie.
2 scenes later, he's speaking Spanish.
So I don't know why he does that, except if he just wants to kind of like tell him, I put a lot of people down here, in these graves, and, he just wanted to be that kind of guy. But I like the little cat and mouse in the cemetery. I wish it was almost a little bit longer and a little bit more complex. But when he smells jasmine, he smells the flower, and basically it's all over the place. And it's like, oh, it really has to end like that?
The stuff in Puerto Rico is good, up to the point where you find out that Nikolai's alive. Then it gets ridiculous. Everything that happens in Puerto Rico is actually probably the best part of the movie. All those things make sense.
You're right, except when they are doing the gun scene, even before Nikolai shows up and parts of the building are collapsing. Nobody's hearing the collapse of the building and the shots being fired, and they're in that building. Let them do what they need to do.
That is some grace.
But you get grace to everything else in the movies.
No, if this is a better movie, if this is better written, you give grace to that.
Even when they're going to Puerto Rico, he's like, do you have your passport? See, I didn't think it was that bad of a thing when I thought they were going to Mexico, but they're going to Puerto Rico. You don't need a passport to go to Puerto Rico. It's a United States territory. That's, again, stupid writing.
It's lazy writing. And there's a lot of that here. And I'll even give Sylvester Stallone some credit. The 3 actors here do as good as they could possibly do with the material they're given. Because I know, Eric, one of your complaints was that Antonio Banderas was over the top.
Yes.
But here's the thing. That character on paper, I guarantee you, he had to bring a lot of that to the character to even make the character relatively interesting. Some of the acting choices here may have been kind of silly, and the laughing thing is, once you hear it, you can't unhear it. I'm not going to put the failure of this movie on
the actors,
Banderas and Moore and Stallone. Stallone is Stallone. Essentially, you're writing a movie, you want him to play himself. That's where he does the best. In that sense, he does okay here. The other characters, they're not fleshed out at all. Any sort of characteristic that they have that you can name, I think is something that they bring to the table.
I go back to the beginning when you were talking about if Elektra was the person who was behind the scenes pulling the strings, if she was Nikolai's daughter, because she fits the age profile of his daughter, and that she's getting revenge on Wrath, I think that would have been fun. But at the end, you're waiting for something more. When those two walk out of the building after everything that's happened, you are left with wanting more. And it's 2.5-hour movie, and you shouldn't be wanting more. It's unfortunate because I enjoyed this movie, but I have to admit that after watching this a couple of times, somebody was kind of like Eric this week. Though I know Eric never watched it a second time because he's like, this movie's so bad, I just can't do it a second time. I couldn't do it a third time after I watched it the second time. I just couldn't make myself do it. So it's going to cause my grade to go down a little bit.
I did. But when you're sitting at 2 hours for a movie, I shouldn't have to go back and do the connections. Who this character is. What is this character's motive? Why did this character do this? And why did they go here? And this is a movie where those characters, in 2 hours, you learn nothing about their backstory except for the little glimpses that you get of the Sylvester Stallone's character. You never get any motivation, or you never get any sort of background on who Miguel is. And you get no indication on who Elektra is. Eric, when you compared Antonio Banderas' character to the Joker, you know what the Joker's there to do.
Exactly.
He's there to be the ultimate foil for Batman. You never understand what the motivation for Antonio Banderas' character is.
Except he wants to be number one. That's all it is.
You know nothing about this character. After 2 hours, I should know who Miguel is. I should know why he's doing what he's doing. And if he's the bad guy, I should understand what the motivation is to get him to the next level. In Julianne Moore's character, I shouldn't have to wonder, one, how she got the information that she got. Two, why is she selling this information? And three, how come she's got this whole network of video cameras in her apartment building? There's a character there that's never fleshed out. And I think that's the biggest indictment of this movie, is that they leave so many questions at the end of the movie that if you actually start to look at the movie, you really have a lot of questions.
Totally agree.
Mhm.
Well, and talking about wrapping things up, why don't we go ahead and start wrapping things up with our reviews? In fact, why don't we go with Ted, because I feel like I already know what Eric's is, and I want to save that for after Ted. So, Ted, why don't you start us off with your final review?
I kind of gave it to you. This is a movie that is infinitely frustrating for me because I go into this movie wanting to like this movie because I do like some of this cheesy 90s, late 80s action movie. This is the meat of the era that I grew up in. And I like these movies. There are some that are good, then there's some that are bad. But in general, I like these kind of movies. So I go to this movie wanting to like it. And the first couple of times I seen it back in the day, I did like it. I enjoyed it for exactly what it was. But now, when I look at it with the eyes that I have now, there are extreme problems with this movie. And it's sad for me because I do want to know more about these characters because I do find Antonio Banderas' character interesting. I do want to know more about Julianne Moore's character because I think that she could be interesting. But this movie never gives an intelligent viewer anything to hold on to. And it's just playing to the lowest common denominator all the time. Like I said, that's so infinitely frustrating for me. Coming off of a movie like Desperado that Antonio Banderas did, that movie is so much better in every sense of the word than Assassins. If you want to watch an Antonio Banderas movie that's actually really good, go from this era, go watch Desperado or El Mariachi. Those are awesome movies. This is skippable. Everything that he brings here, he brings himself. There's nothing to support him here. And that ultimately is the indictment of this movie for me. I can't lie. This movie's a D, and that sucks for me to have to say. Because here again, like I just said, I want to like this movie.
So you don't like the movie?
There's nothing really there for me anymore, and that really sucks. That's all I can say, is that it sucks.
Sounds good. All right, Eric, you're up to bat. Try to beat that.
I'll build on Ted's description of the movie. I agree it does suck. It really sucks. I don't like any of the characters. I don't like the plot very well. I don't like the way the plot is drawn. I don't think the writing's good. I don't think the directing's good. I really don't think there is anything even redeemable about this movie. And I'm watching this movie as a Stallone movie of the 90s. You get what you expect, but you're right. You should have gotten so much more out of Antonio Banderas' character in this. So much more. I understand Stallone, all right? You get what you get with him, but this movie is just... oh man, it's a train wreck. And I've only seen it once in my life, and I don't ever plan on seeing it again. This movie is an F.
Wow, our first F.
Our first F.
Congratulations.
I would rather watch Elf over and over again than watch this movie.
Nice.
That tells you how bad I hate this movie.
Nice. I kind of agree with Ted in a lot of these aspects because it's a movie in the 90s, I liked it. Since then, 25 years later, I find myself not liking it as much as I used to. I am not totally turned around and saying that this is one of the worst movies ever. It still has some fun parts. Antonio Banderas makes this movie worthwhile. I enjoy watching him in almost every scene that he's in. I don't think Sylvester Stallone or Julianne Moore did a bad job here at all. There are a lot of plot holes. There are bad writing. It was a bit too long. We already talked about how we thought this movie could have been better, and that's by making Julianne Moore's character have a little bit more weight instead of being the damsel in distress. because you only have 3 main characters, you have to make all 3 main characters interesting. And that just doesn't happen here. But I do like the action. I do think it's fun, them going back and forth trying to kill each other. I like the scene in the bank where they're discussing about history and everything like that. They know how history is supposed to play out, and then Raph totally dismisses it, and then all of a sudden he's like in this situation where he's getting ready to be shot. He relies on Elektra to save his butt, even though she doesn't want to kill anybody. She's not that type of person. She is a security expert that watches other people from the comforts of her apartment for entertainment purposes, it looks like. It just doesn't make sense that you rely so much on her when she's never been in a position to do any of that. So I get all the reasons why you guys don't like it, but I still like the movie. I will watch it again, but probably not for a while. My grade is a B minus. It probably was a B if you would have asked me in the 90s.
I'm sorry, Ken. Did you say B minus or D minus?
I said B minus, Eric. Yes.
You said D minus, right?
You're a funny man. I say B minus. I own the movie, actually. I bought it not just because we were doing a podcast on it, because I didn't mind having it in my collection.
I own it too, but that doesn't mean I'm going to be pulling it out.
I understand why you don't like it, but at the same time, then I'm going to have to hate every Sylvester Stallone film like this. And it's basically his whole...
Not at all. Not at all. This is just the lowest of the low.
You just painted everything with an extremely broad brush.
This
isn't an indictment of Sylvester Stallone.
Even Rocky in a race car, Driven, is better than this.
I'm not counting the Rocky movies.
No. Right. Rocky in a race car is my nickname for Driven.
I'm talking Demolition Man. I'm talking Cliffhanger. I'm talking The Specialist.
Cliffhanger's bad too. The Specialist is fun bad as well.
And me and Tyda, before we started even doing this review, we even said that this was fun.
That was before I started and that I watched it 3 times this week.
Exactly.
You even said you couldn't pull yourself into
that's
a third
6 hours of your life you'll never get back.
Because you know what? The first time I watched it, I did like it. The first time I watched it, I enjoyed watching it the first time. The second time, not so much. Maybe because Eric was right there and he was trying to cuddle with me. I don't know what was going on there.
I don't know either. I would have rather cuddled with you, Ken, than watch the movie again.
Wow.
That's messed up.
It is messed up.
But I'm just saying, if I have to kick this to the curb, I have to kick all the action movies of Sylvester Stallone to the curb.
You don't have to kick anything to the curb.
I will tell you right now, if I decide we're going to do The Specialist as one of our movies and you review the heck of it, I bet you any money that you would downgrade it down to a C minus to a D plus.
Well, it's been probably 20 years since I've seen it, so I have no idea. It's been that long since I've seen the movie.
Right. But I'm just saying, these movies that Sylvester Stallone does are not these type of movies that holds up. They're good for what they are, a mid-90s action flick, and that's it.
You can't just toss every movie away then, just because one of them is bad.
I don't know. I just listed a bunch of them, and Eric said crap, 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 and crap.
Well, Cliffhanger's horrible.
There is a difference. There is a Moneyball. There's crap, and then there's 50 Feet of crap, and then there's us. Mid-90s Stallone, you know what you're going to get. You know the movie you're going to get.
Right.
And movies like Demolition Man, movies like Cliffhanger, Stop or My Mom Will Shoot.
No, don't put that movie in this.
On.
See, that movie should not be
Isn't that an action movie? Isn't it an action movie? I don't know.
So you're putting Stop and Your Mom Will Shoot in the same category as Assassins? I don't know if I can agree with that. So.
I don't know that. I would say that movie's even worse than Assassins. I'll give you that.
Then you guys are like an F minus. Is there such a thing? F minus.
I want my money back. Yes.
You keep talking about The Specialist. What Assassins also lacks, The Specialist has, is that larger than life big bad guy. You have Eric Roberts playing the stereotypical big bad guy. This movie doesn't have that person moving the plot along.
You don't think Antonio Banderas is...
No, he does not live up to the guy who's moving the chess pieces around the board, who's the mastermind. What should have happened if you wanted something like that, then Nikolai should have been that big bad guy. He should have been more integral into the plot of this movie. And you should have had somebody who chews scenery like Eric Roberts does. Be that part and have him be a major part of this movie and not some throwaway guy at the end that's supposed to be a surprise that isn't a surprise at all because you saw it coming a mile and and a half away.
But that's your typical
And
90s
he's
movie.
not even a real bad guy.
He's one of them. He's an assassin.
He's literally just another guy that they kill.
Yeah, he's an
Whereas
assassin.
in The Specialist, Eric Roberts is a bad guy.
Okay, so but bottom line is this something I could watch again? Yes. It's not something I could watch 3 times in a row. No. But is it something that I'm going to pull out maybe 2 or 3 years down the road? I think I will watch it, and I think I will enjoy it. And that's
Are we talking about the movie?
We're talking about this movie.
I can't ever say that I'll never watch it again at all either.
But to me, a D means that you'll never touch this movie again. That's, in my opinion, a D means that this is the dumbest of the dumb, and there's no reason for me to even bother with this again.
What's an F mean?
Eric gave it that's the dumb of the dumb, and it's the worst thing that you've ever seen. He gave it the F. There are qualities to the movie. That's why it got a D.
And we're going on now what we think of Richard Donner. We talked about the Goonies, and then we also talked about Maverick. Maverick, you gave a D+, plus, and it was something that you'll never see again. But this movie is a D, but it's something you might see again down the road.
I'll probably end up watching Maverick again because you'll probably have it on sometime.
Yeah. I'll tie you to a chair and be like, we'll be playing cards, and all of a sudden I got a flush draw, and it's all of a sudden the ace of spades showed up. Let's get off of this because we've already talked enough about my review and how much you guys are going to disagree with it. But let's talk about Richard Donner as a whole. So, Eric, what is your thoughts after watching 4 movies from Richard Donner? Has your opinion changed on him? Is there's anything else that you want to add to Richard Donner that you didn't say in our initial Spotlight episode?
Now that we've sat back and we've watched all 4 of the movies and we've talked about them, again, this movie I had never seen, therefore I knew nothing going into it, so I have no loyalty to it whatsoever. They can't all be gems. You're going to make a bomb. This is clearly it. Whatever. We'll get off of Assassins. The other movies I enjoyed. The one disappointment I have, and this is more on me, is unfortunately I just could not fall back in love with Goonies like I did when I was 10 and I saw it in the theater. I wanted to so much to just love that movie again and just live that nostalgia of 10-year-old Eric going to the theaters and doing all that. And I just couldn't. And that hurt me. But I couldn't get past it. And that's why I gave it the rating I did at that review. And you can always go back and listen to those reviews. Other than that, I think Richard Donner has made some great movies. I think he's a very good director. I'm happy you picked him, Ken. I really am. I'm not happy you picked this movie. I wish you'd have went with The Toy with Jackie Gleason and Richard Pryor. I really wanted to look at that one. But hey, you know what? You picked what you picked. And I'm sorry I had to give this one an F. Maybe I'm being really harsh on it, but boy, I was just so disappointed. And I set that bar at that 90s Stallone movie. So I knew what I was kind of going into, and it didn't even make that bar, in my opinion. Overall, I like the Donner flicks that we picked.
Ted, what is your opinion on Mr. Richard Donner?
In the situation, I think Eric hit a lot of good points. The movies that were chosen are probably not the best indication of how good of a director he is. I think the Superman movie is good, and I think also, too, that the Lethal Weapon movie is good. And those, I think, are really his highlights, including The Omen. It's hard to go back and to realize that a movie you liked as a kid, like The Goonies, it's not what you thought it was. It doesn't hold up. It doesn't have the same appeal. It doesn't resonate like it did. That's a hard reality to come with. So I think my vision of Richard Donner is kind of clouded for that reason, and that's unfair to him. Inevitably, if you're going to do Richard Donner, you were going to have to do Goonies.
You had to. No, clearly.
Because it's a seminal movie of his. I think the other 2 movies that we did, Maverick and Assassins, they're not classic him. They're not the best of what he has to offer.
It's not Superman, it's not Lethal Weapon.
Exactly.
And those are the 2 key ones. But I understand why we didn't do them.
Right. They fall into another category that will eventually come along. And I think there you'll see how good of a director Richard Donner can be. I think Richard Donner does an extremely good job with The Omen. I think The Omen was definitely my favorite of the 3 movies that we watched.
I really enjoyed rewatching that movie over again. I really did.
Me too. That's where I'm going to end up falling down on him. Ultimately, though, is he a director that I'm going to sit and hey, it's going to be hard now because he's older, obviously, but is he a director that I'm going to go seek out movies of his? Probably not. Because even when you do get to something like Superman or Lethal Weapon, you're going because it's Superman. And Lethal Weapon, you're getting that because you liked Mel Gibson in the late 80s.
You like the combo of Mel Gibson and Danny Glover together in a buddy movie.
Exactly.
And let's be honest, 3 of the 4, and we can argue 4, but the Lethal Weapon series is an incredible series.
Yeah, it's
It really
good.
is. It's really well done.
But is it because of him? Is it because of Donner? I don't know.
Well, we can always review that down the road, but he obviously has something to do with it.
He's got to have something to do with it.
Yeah.
And I think at the end of the day, we've done some really big time directors, and I know the one that's coming up is going to be huge, especially for me. So does he fall into a category with some of the other directors that we've done, like Sidney Pollack or Stanley Kubrick? And no, he doesn't make those kind of movies. I think he's a big budget director. He falls into that category for me above Michael Bay and Jerry Bruckheimer, but below some of the big, really heavy hitting directors. So Ken, I guess this leaves us to the question for you. Are you glad you did Richard Donner?
Yes. And the reason why I'm glad that I did Richard Donner is I enjoy these movies. Granted, I know we just ripped on Assassins, but I particularly still like it as a don't think about it, just watch a movie type of deal. And I still feel that way. I like The Goonies. I like Maverick. I like The Omen. Maverick was a huge success. The Goonies was a huge success. To this day, people still do Goonie type of things, and the lines in the movie Goonies are still repeated by different generations. I would agree that he is not Steven Spielberg. I don't see him in that top level. Every director that we're going to do here is not going to be top-notch director. We don't want to do every single movie that's going to be the greatest thing since sliced bread. If we did that, nobody would want to listen to our podcast. I picked a guy who's fallible, who isn't perfect. I ripped on Assassins just as much as you guys did, except I particularly liked Antonio Banderas to the point where he made it work for me. We talked about the Lethal Weapon movies. I love the Lethal Weapon movies. Couldn't do them because eventually we'd like to do Lethal Weapon on its own. Possibly could have done Superman as a standalone, but he also did a lot of Superman 2, and I would rather have concentrated maybe on the Christopher Reeve Supermans as far as those 4 movies.
And The Toy?
This is where me and Eric are going to disagree. I don't think The Toy is that great of a movie. I think it's mediocre. I don't think it's a bad movie, but I don't think it's good. And I wouldn't put it ahead of any of the 4 movies that we just did.
But I've never seen it.
This would have been perfect for Ted. A movie Ted has never seen. That is a rare.
Right?
Maybe it would be a Richard Pryor movie that we do down the road.
Jackie Gleason flicks. Who knows?
Jackie Gleason flicks. You never know. We might come back. Movies that disappointed me in the 80s. But anyway. But overall, I enjoy him because of what I said earlier. He kind of brings a comic book style to these movies. Even Assassins here is kind of a comic book type of movie. Not everything is fleshed out. You have the Scooby-Doo ending at the end where all of a sudden it's his friend that's been pulling the strings.
And he would have got away for it if it wasn't for those nosy kids.
I think he follows those type of formulas when he's doing these action films, family films. I also like conspiracy theory, but for different reasons. But I think the reason why he's a good director is I think that his actors love him. When I read and watch things that are concerning Richard Donner, the actors that have worked with him can do nothing but sing their praises about him. That says a lot when your cast 20, 30, 40 years down the road still talks about you and almost talks about you like it just happened. And that says something special to me about a director. So coming up next, we're going to be looking at one of Eric's directors. Eric, who will be focusing on, and what is our next movie?
We are going to be focusing on the great director, Mr. Martin Scorsese.
Yay.
And I'll tell you, folks, if you don't know Martin Scorsese, you've been living under a rock for the last 50 years. The man has a catalog of movies that will just take your breath away. It is incredible. And it was very hard for me to pick 4 movies out of this man's catalog to review. I picked these movies really just based on a variety, kind of like Ken did. You could have went with a theme, obviously a mobster theme, which you could have done just by itself on 4 movies. But I picked 4 movies that I think really tell a story about Mr. Scorsese's directing and his movie catalog. So we are going to be kicking it off with Best Picture, 1976, the movie Taxi Driver.
Awesome.
Sounds good.
Thank you, Eric. And Ted, where can people find us on Twitter?
At the movie_marquee with 2 E's.
Thank you, Ted. And you can also join us on our Facebook page, the Movie Marquee. We have an interesting community out there. We posed this question on our community. In the future, we're thinking about doing a review of some comedy concert movies. What would you like to hear us review? And here's some of the answers that we got. El Chapo said Eddie Murphy's Raw. Chad said Richard Pryor live on the Sunset Strip.
El Chapo?
El Chapo. He's a friend of mine.
The cartel guy?
Yeah, the cartel guy.
He listens to the podcast?
Yes,
that's impressive.
Interesting.
We're honored by his presence, or not honored by his presence. We have Laura that says anything George Carlin. Tom said Sinbad, and Justin said Comic Relief with Tony Clifton. So those are some of the answers we got, and we'd like to thank Chad. He proposed this question. He said, I enjoyed the review of The Omen so much, I decided to share my top horror films. Nice job, fellas. What is your top 5? Feel free to jump on our site and share your top 5 with Chad here and then us from the Movie Marquee. And keep those questions coming. We enjoy talking about movies. We're just having a good time with this. So we hope you're having a good time as well. Any last words, my friends?
Thank goodness Martin Scorsese's up.
Yeah, hey, I'm looking forward to it, guys. Appreciate all your hard work and effort, and we'll see you next week.
See you at the movies.
We'll see you next time at the Movie Marquee.